of the Jews in Sports Subcommittee of the Adult Education Committee of Beth Tikva, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the second in our series of Jews in Sports. I want to extend a special thank you to the Machtinger family, and I saw Nancy bopping away to the music earlier, for helping to sponsor tonight's program, which will include a discussion of the film Jews and Baseball, an American love story, which at its heart is a story about overcoming stereotypes. We're fortunate tonight to have two special guests to discuss the film with us, neither of whom really needs much of an introduction. Mike Wilner is going into his 19th season as a member of the Toronto Blue Jays broadcast crew. Mike calls play-by-play for all the Blue Jays radio broadcasts along with Ben Wagner and authors a blog on Sportsnet.ca/590. The first Blue Jays radio play-by-play broadcaster who was born and raised in Toronto, Mike hosted the pre- and post-game shows from 2002 to 2018. A graduate of the University of Toronto in 1994, he began his radio career with the University of Toronto Radio in 1988, where covering the Blue Jays was among his duties. Mike was named sports director there in 1989 and did play-by-play of hockey, football, and basketball. He started his professional play-by-play career at age 19 with the Single-A Welland Pirates, later broadcast for the Single-A Watertown Indians and Double-A Hardware City, New Britain Rock Cats. What a promotion from there. A real mensch, it was Mike's tireless efforts that got Tom Cheek inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2013. Tonight's moderator will be Paige Megan, another name that will be familiar to many of us who attended our children's bar mitzvahs and all kinds of samchas what feels like decades ago. Paige Megan is the president of Megan Boys Entertainment. Launched in 1999 with twin brother John, Megan Boys Entertainment started out as a two-man disc jockey team. Today, MBE is Canada's #1 full-service boutique entertainment agency specializing in creative content development, event production, and live entertainment. Well known for his work in the Jewish community, Paige and his brother have recently launched a new organization called Product for Purpose, from which proceeds for the sale of curated products helps to serve families affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Mike and Paige, welcome. Take it away.
Wow. First of all, what a great introduction. I don't think I've ever gotten a better one. So I don't know, Ron, you can join us at any point of this conversation. Thank you, everyone. Can everyone hear me, first of all? If you can hear me, let me just see you wave. Let me just see some waves of all the people. Aaron Wolkoff's got a great, we may have to do the first ever Zoom wave, actual Zoom wave at one point in this or not. My name is Paige, and I'm flattered to be here as I've grown up at Beth Tikva as a child. My grandparents have a little sign on one of those things where you light on the side of the walls, and I got married at Beth Tikva, so I feel very connected to Beth Tikva, and I'm just proud to be a part of this very special night. And I want to introduce my very dear friend, a guy that answers my calls when I call him. It's very special and flattering, as he is to me an incredible voice, an incredible energy, and just an incredible guy, Mike Wilner. Mike, how you doing, man?
Doing as well as we can expect to be doing right now. Paige, thank you for that lovely introduction. Ron, also, thank you. I didn't expect to get two fantastic introductions tonight, but it's great to be here, and I'm always happy to answer your calls, Paige. Anytime. Anybody who brings me in to watch a live camel come into a shul in the middle of a wrestling ring, I will do anything for it anytime.
Well, for those of you that want to know about that story, we'll park it for after. But I do professional wrestling events sometimes, and Mike has had the ability to be my my co-host, play-by-play announcer in a few of the most random moments in the history of synagogues. So, but tonight,
and while I don't have the same kind of connection to Beth Tikva that Paige does, certainly I'm thrilled to be asked to do this. I know that my mother sang in the Kol Shirah at Beth Tikva for a long time, and I was in a wedding there, though I didn't get married there. So I'm a big fan of you guys and what you do, and thank you again.
So first of all, we're gonna have a conversation. We're gonna be talking about Jews in baseball, okay? The American Love Story. I hope that everyone had a chance to see the documentary, and we're gonna bring it up, and we're gonna actually open the conversations and questions to everyone a little bit later, because I really want to get some input, from Mike, because I think that he has the closest lens to the game that anyone I know at this point. So let's kind of talk about that, Mike. So I mean, look, I saw the film. Felt very emotionally connected to it. The film opens up with the clip from the movie Airplane. I mean, it's hysterical, but it works in the plays of the stereotype that Jews are horrible at sports. I mean, the thing that I want to ask is, like, do you think that the film, like this, does it do enough to break that stereotype, or is this something that we just have to live with, that Jews don't belong in sports? I mean, help me out here.
I mean, I think we got more than a pamphlet now as far as great Jewish athletes, which might not have been the case 30 years ago. We're Jews are never going to be known for their athletic prowess. Look, we had Mark Spitz win 8 gold medals in the Olympics in '72, and we still, like, Airplane was made 10 years after that, and it was still just a pamphlet with Sandy Koufax in the background and Hank Greenberg and all of that. But I do think things have changed in the last few years. And look, we've got here this Israel baseball kippah that I've got on the Kevin Pillar bobblehead. Team Israel went to the second round of the World Baseball Classic last time around, and they pulled off some pretty big upsets with a team that was basically full of American Jews. We've got some athletes. We've got some athletes across a whole bunch of sports. I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where people think Jew equals great at sports, but I do think we're sort of moving forward, moving away from the whole stereotype that it's all about academics and it's not about athletics.
Well, I mean, like, my son wants to play video games when he's older, and I'm almost like, I guess, it's like we a different mindset, right? As we grow into the culture of our community, right? But I'll never forget. This is, even though it's a hockey thought, but I did Zach Hyman's first signing in the Jewish community. It was an event that I did for USDS RHA Bathurst at the time, and the first person to wait in line and go to him with his son with an autograph went up to him and literally verbatim was like, "Great job. Now you're giving hope to all my son and all of his stupid friends that I think they're going to be hockey players because of you." It's like, it wasn't even a compliment. It was like an insult to the athlete. And he was like, "What do you want me to say? I worked hard." It's like, it was just interesting. Well,
yeah, I think things are changing that way in the way parents are looking. And, your guy was taking a shot at him because now he has to indulge everybody's dreams of maybe making it to the NHL, right? And not say, no, there's no way, because there's a kid from Chat who wound up playing for the Leafs. But if you look back at our generation, at the people who are in their 40s and 50s right now, and you look at the Jews, there's a lot of doctors, a lot of lawyers, a lot of accountants and actuaries, but you look at people in their 20s and 30s, and it's way more of a diverse set of occupations. And yeah, I don't know if that's because just another generation of assimilation or what it is, but now I think there's a sort of a wider spectrum of things that Jewish parents will support their children getting into, and sports is one of them.
We'll wait for the data on that one, But, to me, I learned a lot in this film. I mean, the film chronicles not only the history of baseball, but the history of Jews in America, which I thought I had a pulse on, but it was still a big reminder. I mean, the movie draws attention between a certain eras, the 1800s to the 1920s, 30s. And it shows how there's approximately, 2 million immigrants that came into the U.S. and baseball was like this magnetic force, and it felt like there was some belonging in local centralized places, Brooklyn, New York, Chicago, LA, and some of the Jewish leaders felt like embracing baseball and assimilating into the American culture was a harmful thread, because they were being kind of casted as, the bad guy to someone. What are your thoughts about that energy right there?
I think it's really interesting because, like you said early in the film, you think of America, you think baseball, at least back in the,
Right.
Babe Ruth era, the 20s and 30s, and then a little while forward into the 50s where the Yankees were winning the World Series every year, it felt like. And if you want to move away from being the other, and if you want to belong and have something to talk about with these people that you have nothing in common with, baseball was a great way to do that, to assimilate and to show these people who have never seen a Jew in their lives that, it's okay. We're not that different. We understand the same sorts of things. And I think that's why a lot of people really, really threw themselves into baseball at that point in time. And with so many Jews moving to New York, to Brooklyn, and having 3 baseball teams there until the early 40s, that was the heartbeat and the pulse of that city. And that was a great way to feel a part of things and to be able to have conversations with people. It's different, obviously, in the States than it is here in Canada. I think Canadians are sort of proud of the cultural mosaic, where for the Americans, it's a melting pot, and you come to the States and you're an American, and they encourage you to leave your old world beliefs behind. Jews were never going to do that, but they were certainly going to be able to become Americans. And baseball was a huge, huge part of doing that, for sure.
Well, it's funny. It reminded me of the story. I don't want to get off guard with pro wrestling, but when the Italians were moving to New York, and the WWF at the time made Bruno Sammartino their champion, because not only was he a good wrestler, but he fit the demographic of the local city, and there was a lot of Italians. And so what I was blown away with was that I guess it was in the 20s or whatever, that they needed a rival for Babe Ruth, so they used Mo Solomon, what they call them, the Rabbi of SWAT, as a draw card. I mean, so when you look at the fact that they were even aware of that business acumen, and they allowed, they focused on getting certain Jewish players in certain markets to sell a ticket. I mean, it's been going on for years, hasn't it?
I mean, for sure. But it's interesting when you look at the progression too, because like you said, Moses Solomon was brought in to be the New York Giants version of Babe Ruth, or at least the draw. And he got 8 at-bats in the big leagues with all the promotion and everything, and he got hurt, and he went to play football. But then you fast forward at 30 years when the Miracle Mets won the World Series in 1969, right? How much were the Mets pushing Art Shamsky as your Jew on the Mets? It wasn't a thing. So they tried it, and then at some point there were enough, and maybe it's because this is post Koufax, that you didn't need to push it that much. So it was interesting though to see the story of Mo Solomon and further and further on till you got to Greenberg, who they couldn't get to a major market because of the reserve clause. And why would the Detroit Tigers want to not have Hank Greenberg? And then Koufax in first Brooklyn and then LA, and that was a whole new landscape for Jews in baseball and Jewish fans of the game.
So I have a little bit of a distraction in the back, and I got a private message from Ricky about waiting for a Barry Horowitz reference. So we'll give him one of those. Two to your thought. One, and I've heard that you have been a person that's been involved in a similar situation. I want to hear your thoughts on this. But, Andy Cohen, Hank Greenberg, Sandy Koufax, I mean, these are monster names, right? Real names that, aren't not just necessarily superstars as because they're Jewish, but just superstars, right? And I mean, they've helped change the Jewish they've helped change the Jewish perspective on the sport, as well as the American perception of Jews in general, right? I mean, by making choices, by not playing on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, I mean, these ball players showed their first value to the sport, and then made public choices to remain true to the people and their religion. And I feel like that was such a, like, it's still a part of their DNA, but how pivotal was this of their decisions to the American perception of Jews, that this was more important than playing the game?
Look, Sandy Koufax didn't play on Yom Kippur, didn't pitch in Game 1 of the World Series, and that was 1965. People are still talking about it 55 years later. That's right. How important that was, right? People still make that reference. Hey, Koufax didn't pitch on Yom Kippur. So it was that. It was interesting to see that story that the chief rabbi of Michigan or whatever told Hank Greenberg that he should play on Rosh Hashanah. That I don't know if that was more baseball fan or a halacha or that was interesting to me. But it's different. Baseball is different now in that decision has to be made so much more often, because the season used to end on September 15th and it would be over by the end of September. There was nothing but the World Series when Sandy Koufax didn't pitch. And so a lot of the times the season would be over. The World Series would be over by the time the high holidays came around.
Yeah.
But for Koufax to not pitch in Game 1 of the World Series was huge. And now, if I'm not going to work on the high holidays, and I've been lucky enough so far that I haven't had any pressure to work on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I've taken them off every year. If they say, hey, you know what, this is a big game, you should probably do it. 55 years later, I can say, hey, Sandy Koufax didn't pitch on Yom Kippur.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real footnote that now, I mean, I think adds to the legendary energy and the status of what a larger than life at the time, and now as it ages like a fine wine, it still holds.
And look, the people there are people who are watching this.
Yeah.
All of the people out in our Zoom audience, many of whom remember it at the time. You and I don't. Neither of us were born yet. And as we get farther into this, I'd love to hear some of those people's perspectives on what it meant when they saw that Don Drysdale was pitching Game 1 of the '65 World Series instead of Koufax.
So please note that everyone that was focused or was at the time aware of what was going on, we'd love to share. We'd love to hear where were you or what you were thinking at the time moment. But back to that. So what I remember doing this event with you and Kevin Pillar. Do you remember this event? And we spoke about this, how you were supposed to work on Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, but you didn't work. And I mean, that did happen to you. Was that a circumstance thing or was that a choice thing?
No, there's been with the season having extended, there's been a game for me to work on Rosh Hashanah pretty much every year. Mm-hmm. And whether, the Blue Jays have never been in the playoffs, so that's made that decision a little bit easier a few times. But yeah, there's been a game on Rosh Hashanah every year. There's been a game on Yom Kippur most years. And from, 2002 when I started until 17, so for 16 years, I was working the playoffs as well, whether the Blue Jays were in them or not. So there was always there was always a game. There was always work. But again, I never have, and I'm not planning on ever doing it. It's interesting because this year was supposed to be, this was the first time I ever got a little bit of pushback, and we never really got to it. But this year, had there been a season, and I still think there will be, but obviously with a different schedule, but had there been the season that was supposed to be played this year, the last game of the season was Kol Nidre. The game starts at 3:00, and Kol Nidre's going to be 6:30, 6:45, because it's the end of September. But the Blue Jays were in Cleveland, supposed to be on the last day of the season. Had they been at home, it wouldn't have been an issue. I would have done the game. I would have left at 6. I would have hightailed it to shul, and eaten something on the way. But obviously, this isn't a normal year. So I said to them at the beginning, look, this is I can't work that day. I'll have to drive home after the Saturday night game so that I'm home Sunday from Cleveland. And they were saying, well, it's the last game of the season, and I don't know, and we don't want you to miss. It's kind of important. But obviously, it never got to that next level of discussion where I just would have said, look, it's not happening. But that's for the most part, it's just been, okay, these are the days you need off, no problem.
Get it, man. Well, I mean, thank you for your service at that point, for all those things that you do, and you uphold your all sides of you. So that's beautiful. I mean, keeping back to the tone of ball players that were put into the mix. Looking at it from a racial perspective. Let's move into that little field. I mean, there's been a number of examples in the movie of players that were subjected to racial slurs throughout the game from the stands. I mean, in many cases, they chose to first ignore those slurs, but at some point, some of these guys reached a breaking point. I remember the Syrian guy, made a note of him, and the decision was to fight back, sometimes with domestic violence. I mean, does this still happen? I guess I don't want to go across all races, but just even from a Jewish perspective, like, is there racial slurs that are still coming out today that you're hearing about?
No, I'm not, which is a great thing. It doesn't mean they're not happening, but I'm certainly not hearing about it. And of course, you're focusing on the Sephardi guy. We knew that one was coming, of course. But look, you know what? There's the whole story around Jackie Robinson about how he never fought back, never gave people the satisfaction, never wanted to show anger so that he would be painted as the angry black man. And it was an incredible job of self-discipline for him not to fight back. Hank Greenberg did fight back, right? Not a whole lot, but we saw in the movie some of the insults that were thrown his way, and he didn't stand for it. And he didn't have as much to lose, I don't think, as Jackie Robinson did, because he wasn't carrying the standard for his entire people. Jackie was the first, and if that hadn't gone well, then who knows how long it would have been until there was a second. But I'm thrilled to hear that Hank Greenberg did lash back against some of the people who were saying some of those horrible things. As far as now, with the recent civil rights, Black Lives Matter stuff going on in the U.S., all the major sports teams were putting out their statements, but the Boston Red Sox went a step further, where they talked about specific incidents of racial taunting at Fenway Park, and it's been like I don't even know if it's open secret for years, but black players have said many times the awful things they hear, and they've gotten fans ejected and all that stuff. And the Red Sox finally said something a couple of weeks ago that said, that's it. Enough is enough. We're not standing for any of it anymore. This is not who we are, and this is not who we want our fans to be. And if this is you who comes into the ballpark to yell things like this, we don't want you. Yeah. And that's a huge, huge step forward. But no, I from whether it's Sean Green or Danny Valencia or Kevin Pillar or whoever that I covered with the Blue Jays, I never heard any of them say anything about people making Jewish related insults towards them. I'm sure it happens every once in a while. A lot of people are just the absolute worst, but nothing that I've heard, and certainly nothing you hope that is prevalent.
Yeah, and actually, side note, I'm in the middle of completing a documentary right now about Jews in wrestling. I think Gail will talk about it at one point. It's called Superstars of David. That's the name of the movie that'll be out hopefully next year. And a lot of it has to do with some of the characterization of the Jew and the stereotype. I mean, wrestling's very colorful, so it does happen a lot, but it's in an entertainment way, not necessarily entertaining, but it's different with the sport. I mean, and even with myself, who've got young kids that are playing hockey and baseball, you know, if this ever does happen, and now is that time where we're hearing a lot more anti-Semitism on the rise, and a lot of the energies of things being put in our direction. I mean, should we teach our children to fight back, the youth? And if so, what lessons can be learned, you know, in order to, you know, protect, you know, our pride here? You know, how do you handle that?
I don't know. It's a fantastic question, and I don't know. I don't know if fighting back serves any purpose. It certainly serves a visceral purpose in the moment.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it does any good.
I mean, I'd like to save that question to even asking the others that are on the air that are watching, because, I mean, none of us are athletes, right? We all have children or grandchildren, and we want to teach them right from wrong. And I mean, it's a very kind of scary time, right? And how do we defend ourselves, right? That's a real thought.
It really is. It really is. And I don't know what the right answer is, and I don't know what the best answer is. But I mean, you don't want to be a punching bag, literally. And if anything gets physical, then, you know, that gets even scarier. But I don't know. I don't think escalating things. I don't think giving people the reaction they want is the right way to fix a situation. Yeah.
Well, I want to get back to that. I want the group to maybe give us some comments on that thought, how to handle it at this point. Let's move into, and again, I learned so much about this with Hank Greenberg. I mean, Hank Greenberg to me, I mean, I didn't know he was 6'4". I knew the name. I knew the stats. I used to be a stats junkie. I knew that he was a real, you know, Harmon Killebrew, Hank Greenberg, Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle. I mean, I knew he was one of those names, whether he was Mount Everest name. I don't know. At the time, I'm sure he was. Mount Rushmore, sorry. But, you know, I didn't know he was chasing Babe Ruth's record, right? And while he was, like, you know, keenly aware of what was happening to the Jews in Europe, I mean, in 1938, the film does note that to Greenberg, every run, every home run, everything he did was against Hitler. He was doing it in such a loud, proud, pride way. And this was like his small way of standing up for his people. Once again, people were looking to him as this hope, this larger than life, right? So, I mean, but there were some who felt that, you know, because no one wanted a Jew to break Babe Ruth's record. This was news to me, right? No one wanted to see him break the record. That the teammates and others actively stood in his way of achieving his goal, from the, you know, the extra walks, the pitching around him. I mean, Hank, I guess, lived it and didn't have the same views on that. But do you think that he was, we use the word snubbed or slighted on being able to achieve that Babe Ruth beating that record?
I mean, I'm going to go with Hank here and agree with him and say I don't think so. I looked up the numbers of, you know, it felt like in the movie it was painted as once he got to 58 home runs, everybody just stopped pitching to him, and that was the end of it, and he was never going to be allowed to hit a home run the rest of the way. But we also heard that in the last game of the season, he went 3 for 3. So obviously they're pitching to him. He got to 58 home runs. It's on September 27th. So there were 5 games left in the season at that point. And in those 5 games, he went 5 for 18. He walked 4 times. So it wasn't like he wasn't getting pitches to hit. It wasn't like people were avoiding him.
Those are good numbers too, right?
Yeah. You know what? So I don't think so. I think that he just didn't hit a couple of home runs over 5 games, which is perfectly normal, which happens all the time. And we had faced Bob Feller in one of those games. So
how many games were going in a season at that time?
At the time, there were 154.
Oh, I see.
They played 155, I think, because there was a tie in there. But yeah, it was 154 as opposed to the current, or well, what should be 162.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, and I felt that it wasn't like, I mean, 58 home runs is a real number, right? I don't know who was in third place at the time. So, I mean, it would have been. It would have been monstrous, a monster thing, because that record, what that record held until what, Mantle or Maris? What was that?
Bill Maris in '61, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and that would have lasted what, was that 25 years? What was that number?
More than that, I think. I don't know. 27 that Babe Ruth hit the 60.
30.
Well, people in here will know. I think it might have been 27. So that's 34 years.
Was that 38 or 27 was that?
38 was when Greenberg 38 was Greenberg's last year.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Greenberg hit 58 home runs in 1938. 40 was his last year.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a big record.
Yeah.
Right? Big record. So yeah. So definitely nothing to be ashamed of, to be hitting 58 home runs in 1927. Let's be clear. Another thing, back to the Greenberg thing, because I felt like it was a very big. I thought it was, when I saw it, I was like, this is probably like a big Koufax thing, and Koufax obviously had his minutes, but I really was loving the focus on Greenberg, and what I really loved was that heartwarming story of Hank Greenberg and the friendship and active support that he had for Jackie Robinson. I mean, to me, as a Jew, often on the receiving end of anti-Semitic slurs, Greenberg felt the need not only to support Jackie, but the integration movement within the sport as a whole. I mean, do you think that the struggles faced by Greenberg and Robinson have changed today? Why or why not?
Yeah, I mean, they absolutely changed as far as sports goes, but we're seeing a whole thing in the NHL now that's starting to come to light about their treatment of black players and what those guys have to put up with. So they're still back in the 40s and 50s as far as the NHL is concerned, and the whole hockey culture thing, it's just so completely embarrassing. And they're finally getting that out into the light now. So hopefully that'll get done. But yeah, I mean, first of all, to go back to what you said at the beginning, I love the fact that Hank Greenberg got as much time as he did in this documentary, because you feel like every time there's a Jewish baseball story or a Jewish baseball movie or anything, it's like 98% Koufax and 2% everything else. And Sandy Koufax deserves it. He had, maybe the best 5-year run of any pitcher in the history of the game before or since. And again, that whole didn't pitch in the World Series on Yom Kippur thing is massive. But Hank Greenberg deserves a lot of attention, and I was really glad that he got it. And look, just the fact that he touched Jackie Robinson. I mean, when you think about it, how ludicrous it is that was a big deal. The fact that he touched Jackie Robinson, helped him up when they collided, put his arm around him at first base, that was massive. Wow. And a huge, huge step, and Greenberg knew exactly what he was doing, and he was doing it for all the right reasons. Yeah,
I love that, and I love that. I just love that there's that connection. The film. I want to have a bullet here on how the film, chronicles the creation of the players' union. I mean, breaking the artificial salary ceiling to see what the business is now, and the abolishment of the reserve clause. I didn't know what that reserve clause bullet, and this was all important, necessary then. But given the current climate, do you think the sport is better or worse off now than it was then? I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously the big business now, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the players aren't indentured servants anymore with the reserve clause who have to, beg for money. We saw where Koufax and Drysdale held out together to break that $100,000 a year ceiling. And Sandy Koufax wound up getting $132,500, which is obviously, quick math says a 32.5% raise that Walter O'Malley could more than afford. But still nowhere close to a fair share of what they were worth, because the players are the product, and people don't come to watch owners and balance sheets. People come to watch these great athletes play the sport. I heard a story because of the current labor situation. I heard a story about Walter O'Malley, the Dodgers owner, was furious one year because they lost $2 million. The general manager was really, really happy. He stayed on budget. They made they had a great year, and they made a bunch of money. And the Dodgers as a team made $4 million that year. But Walter O'Malley, the owner, threw a fit because when the GM came into his office and said, "We lost $2 million this year." And the GM said, "What are you talking about? We made 4." And O'Malley says, "Yeah, but last year we made 6. So we lost $2 million." And that's how these guys think. And it's unfortunate. But yeah, from the breaking of the reserve clause, it hasn't exactly been, a spout of money going to the players. The owners are still, the franchise values are going through the roof.
Yeah.
And the players, a lot of these players have to fight for scraps. And that's what's happening right now, as we're waiting for them to decide what kind of season there will be if the virus allows it to happen. But owners are not willing to take any kind of loss, and players feel like they should be making what they're supposed to be making per game, as opposed to for the full season. So it's still not better in that there's really not an equitable distribution of the revenues of the game, but it's much better in that players now have the right to move. Though they have to be in the big leagues for 6 full years before that happens. Mm-hmm. But there is free agency. The great players are still making bucket loads of money. The minimum salary is very, very good. Yeah. So all that stuff is better, but it's not better enough yet.
Well, it's funny. 2 questions. One, I don't know if you saw that Michael Jordan documentary about how The Last Dance, but with how Scottie Pippen was really pissed off at the time because he signed in '91. He signed like an 8-year deal worth $1.7 million a year, but he should have been making $20 million the last 4 or 5 years of his contract. I mean, it shows that like even, I guess 50, 60, 70 years later, there was still some type of unhappy, position from an athlete. But going to this is a question I don't know the answer to. So are you saying now that the players now, are they getting paid to sit at home right now?
No, they're not.
Yeah.
They got a cash advance at the beginning of spring training, but right now the fight is over how many games, what percentage of their salary they'll get for how many games. And today the offer the players turned down was 60 games at full proration. So they would have been paid 60 out of 162 of their salary. But they turned it down because part of it was also that they weren't going to be able to, they had to give up their right to file a grievance.
And there's no gate though. Like how is the owner going to be satisfied with that when there's no one buying tickets to the game?
Last week, they just got $3 billion from TBS for a new playoff contract. Most major league teams, if not all major league teams, are ahead before they sell a single ticket.
Okay. On the rights, on the TV rights.
Yeah.
Interesting. So the tickets, what does the tickets do? They just cover some of the admin costs of running a business like that?
I mean, there's profit, but it's extra profit. It's more money that comes in, but yeah, TV rights and the money that was distributed a couple of years ago when Major League Baseball got, I don't know what it was, $1.8 billion or something when they sold their advanced media division. They're doing very, very, very well. And I think that even when they don't sell a single ticket this year, some teams may lose money. Most teams won't. Some teams will, but some teams that lose money are also are also doing all right because the franchise is worth,
so much,
50 times more than it was when they bought it.
Right, and that's what I always heard about that. And then Kenny Burnkoff just said that only hockey depends on gate for profitability. Good to thank Ken for that. Let's ask a couple questions, and let's see if we can get some of the questions from the people that are out there watching. And I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. I want to see that you're all smiling. Are we seeing some smiles? Let me see. Let's see those people. Are we? If you're enjoying yourself, give me a thumbs up for a minute. Can someone give me a? There we go. Thank you. Guys, it means so much because we don't know. We're live performers. We feed off the crowd, and when we have people just staring at us like this, we don't know if we're doing a good job or not. So thank you for that. It means so much to have us share some friendly banter. Okay, so here's a question. If you had to pick the most influential Jew in baseball, who would you choose?
Like ever or right now?
Well, how many Jews are in baseball are right now? But obviously it's going to be an all-timer, I think.
About a half dozen right now, I think.
Yeah.
All time, it's got to be Koufax.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah, no questions, I guess.
I think that's plain and simple. Everybody's answer immediately.
Now, okay, so you don't need to explain that. I think what I want to know maybe through that question is anyone today, I mean, it's not relative to the trying to make a statement like that because we've already, it's a hard statement and a hard thing to feed. But is anyone trying to make a statement or really showing their true blue colors of being a Jew in the sport? Is there anyone giving that, or are they just regular people that are just athletes that are not necessarily, I wouldn't say the word leverage, but like putting their religion in front of their identity?
Yeah, I don't think we have that conversation very often these days about, is he going to play on Rosh Hashanah?
Right.
Is he going to play on Yom Kippur? Kevin Pillar played on the high holidays when the Blue Jays were in the playoffs in 15 and 16. I don't think there was any suggestion made that Alex Bregman for Houston, the dirty cheaters, was going to not play on the high holidays or anything like that. So no, that debate's not even had. So that fact shows you that we're not in that era anymore. But we do have guys who play for Israel, who are thrilled to play for Israel in the World Baseball Classic, which is terrific. There are guys who are, I think it's different with Americans. The secularness of American Jews is much more about identity than practice, I think, for most American Jews. And I think for a lot of Canadian Jews, it's about both. But which is not to say that there aren't a lot of secular Canadian Jews too. But I think it's just sort of more so where in the States, being Jewish is more who I am as opposed to what I do. So we don't really see that all that much. But no, there's nobody like that out there right now. It's just too bad that there are like 8 Jews in the major leagues right now, and 2 of them are huge cheaters, which is a bit of a shunda. But we'll get by. It'll get better.
Tough one. What are your thoughts on that? The Astros stuff.
It's awful. I think it's part of the whole the way the game is moved towards. This is no longer about entertainment. It's about winning at all costs and doing whatever you have and trying to get that edge and get ahead and find every little tiny edge that you can get, and it kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you convince yourself, I'm sure, that everybody else is doing it and it's not really that bad while you're making a complete mockery of the game of baseball. So it's really unfortunate, and it's too bad that the Astros, wherever they go, won't be booed mercilessly because we got bigger things to worry about right now. But it's really unfortunate. And the other shunda, of course, is Ryan Braun with the Brewers, who got dinged for steroids a few years ago and vehemently denied it and specifically accused one of the Brewers. I don't know if it was a trainer or if it was one of the Brewers clubhouse workers of messing something up before he finally said, no, I did it and all that stuff. So that's pretty awful too.
Well, I was doing an Instagram live with my buddy John Baker. Do you know who he is, John Baker? He's the mental skills coach for the Cubs. Invited me once to the Chicago Cubs training facility in Scottsdale. Unbelievable guy. And he was for a couple of years he was the bat catcher, so he was central control for the team. And he noticed that whenever he played a certain game, I think it was I don't know who it was that he said, but he knew that they knew something because the way they were presenting themselves or the way they were positioning themselves or knowing what to do, they had an edge, right? And so it was just interesting that it did exist. I mean, knowing or the word cheating is loose on the inside. It is loose on the inside of these athletes because
sure.
In every way, I don't know if you've ever gone like this to someone else's test at school. And so it's just interesting that the athletes the media is sensationalized, and they did cheat, so obviously they need to be punished. But it has been going on for longer than we think.
Yeah, but not as brazenly, I don't think, as the Astros were doing it.
Yeah, no, there's like drones over the clubhouse or whatever. So no, I get it. But I just remember he was saying at the time, this is probably 2004, 2005. Different technology, different energies. Anyway,
right. Yeah. For
another discussion.
But if you want to talk about someone suggesting the most influential Jew, I'm going to go with, I would say, Marvin Miller. Bud Selig was the commissioner, and he made a lot of good changes and a lot of bad changes to the game. But Marvin Miller, who they talked about deserving to be in the Hall of Fame, he got in this year. So would have been inducted next month had there been a normal year and a normal induction. But Marvin Miller, who was the driving force behind forming the Players Union, absolutely for me the most influential maybe person in baseball, regardless of whether he's Jewish or not.
So for those who don't know who that is, and I'm one of them, help me draw that out with Marvin Miller.
Aha, see, you turned off the movie too early, Paige.
No. I wanted to hear you say it like the way you know. That's important.
Look, Marvin Miller was the first head of the Major League Baseball Players Association. He was the guy who went to court with Curt Flood to strike down the reserve clause. And the reserve clause was what held players to the team that they signed with as 16, 17, 18-year-olds for their entire professional career. And the team completely dictated how much they made, where they played, everything. And Curt Flood was traded and said, I don't want to go. I don't feel like this is your right to just assign me to another city when I'm a Major League Baseball player. And they wound up suing, and Curt Flood lost the suit and was out of baseball. Like, the stance cost him his career. But a couple of years later, there were a couple of pitchers named Andy Messersmith and Dave McNally who this wasn't in the movie, so I'm kind of going from memory here. I believe what they did was not sign their contracts before either 74 or 75, and they played out the season. And then once the season was over, they felt legally that because the contracts were unsigned, the team had no further hold on them. And that's what wound up creating free agency that has evolved into the whole free agent thing as we know it. Teams still hold the players all of their rights for the first 6 years, but now at least you have the 10-5 rule, which is that a player who's been on one team for 10 years, or pardon me, a player who's been in the major leagues for 10 years and on the same team for 5 can refuse a trade. If they trade him, he has the right to say no. A player who's been in the major leagues for 5 years can refuse an assignment to the minor leagues. They can say, you want to send me down, I'm not going down. And then that player, if he's not kept in the major leagues by the team, becomes a free agent. Obviously stuff like minimum salary, arbitration, all these things that have become so important. And really it's all because of Marvin Miller.
It's funny because I remember as a kid, I was like, what does arbitration mean? Are you telling me that a Jew was responsible for using that word in a baseball language?
I mean, probably. I think it was used many times legally before that, but yeah, probably. The players' union under Marvin Miller brought that in for sure.
Unbelievable. So yeah, so George Bell was going for arbitrate. I never understood it. So,
The big bone of contention for the Blue Jays back in the '80s. Damaso Garcia got really mad at the arbitration. I think that's how most of us found out about it.
Right. So I think, I mean, that's most of all the questions I have, but I'm looking at some of the notes and I want to see some of these guys. Maybe we can try to keep them, one word or quick answers, but I also want to see if I can call on Bob Cooper at the end of this, just because I think he has a vast knowledge of a lot of these things. But let's just try to go on some quick answers on this. Best Jewish hitter of all time.
Greenberg.
Yeah, so Ricky, that's
Rod Carew, not a Jew. A lot of people think he converted, but he didn't. So yeah, it's Hank Greenberg.
Got it. Best pitcher, it's easy.
Yeah, we've gone over that already. That's for sure.
Koufax. Okay, I mean, someone was saying about the Dodger broadcaster Red Barber said the most influential people in shaping the game today were Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, and Marvin Miller. So that's an interesting note.
That's a quote right out of the doc. Yeah. So absolutely. Look, I mean, baseball looks the way it looks because of Marvin Miller for sure.
And then, given the run of unexpected success of Team Israel in the last WBC, that's World Baseball Championships, do you expect to see any more MLB players on Team Israel in the next WBC?
I hope so, but there seem to be a lot fewer major leaguers. The thing is, the best one is Alex Bregman, and he is good enough that he plays for Team USA. Kevin Pillar thought hard about playing for Team Israel in the last World Baseball Classic. He didn't, but I would expect that he might in this one. It wouldn't surprise me to see Ryan Braun maybe playing for Israel this time because he's not good enough to play for Team USA anymore. Max Fried, who's a young lefty with the Atlanta Braves, Jock Peterson with the Dodgers. Those guys, Danny Valencia, who was a Blue Jay, is already playing for Team Israel. But, Rowdy Tellez, why not? He may get the opportunity to play. I'm sure they'll ask him. They'd be happy to have him. And it wouldn't surprise me if he did it.
Rowdy Tellez is Jewish?
Rowdy Tellez's mother was Jewish, yeah. His dad's Mexican, his mom's Jewish. He doesn't really identify at all. He remembers lighting Hanukkah candles, but that's it. But I think, he falls under the rule where he's eligible to play, and why wouldn't he? There are a couple of young pitchers, Robert Stock in the Padres organization, Ryan Sheriff with the Cardinals. I think those guys will play, but the superstars, and really the only Jewish superstar right now is Alex Bregman. He'll play for the U.S. because they'll want him to play for the U.S. and I think that's it would be an interesting thing to see if a player felt like he had to make that send that message that he would rather play for Israel than play for the U.S. That would be awesome, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, that'd be unbelievable. That's a Koufax level move right there.
Right. Yeah.
Let's get the word out to Alex Bregman. Let's get Bob Cooper, the living legend. Bob, are you there?
I am here. Thank you very much.
Guys, if you don't know Bob, well, you got to know Bob. And the thing about Bob is that he is a legend. I bet Tikva, the man walks down the street and people say, aren't you that guy that has Jewish memorabilia? You are a guy that is an encyclopedia of sorts. Tell us your connection to baseball and what you got to show us, as if this is your first show and tell since
there we go.
What school did you go to as a kid?
This is exactly. So I have studied a lot of Jewish baseball history, and I am also a memorabilia collector. Like everybody else who's watching, I collected cards as a kid. I was able to save the hockey cards from my mother throwing them out. But I was always a big baseball fan. A couple of interesting stories, because you mentioned about today in the clubhouse. I had dinner about 1.5 years ago with Steve Yeager, who was the Dodgers catcher for about 10 years. And he converted to Judaism. He actually converted after his career. And he converted because his wife's father, at that time fiance, was a Holocaust survivor. And he felt that in honor of him, he wanted his daughter to marry someone who was Jewish. And I asked him, in all your years in the Dodger clubhouse, what was it like as far as racism and anti-Semitism? And his answer was actually a really nice answer. He said, this is the Dodgers. If you remember, they won the 81 World Series. Fernando Valenzuela came on that year. And he said, we were teammates. We had Mexicans, we had black players, we had Latinos, whites, Jews. We had everybody on the team somewhere. So we didn't have time for that. That just wasn't something that interested us. They were your teammates. So it was really a nice answer for that. A couple of other things that were very interesting. I was watching like you were saying with the Koufax story. And one of the things that was mentioned in the movie was that Koufax, because he had signed with the Dodgers and he had a bonus contract, they had to keep him on the major league team. And because of that, somebody else, another pitcher, had to be sent down. And so there was that resentment. Now, that pitcher who got sent down is also a Hall of Famer. He only had 4 career wins as a pitcher. But that person, he is still alive. He's actually the oldest Hall of Famer still alive. So the pitcher who was sent down so Koufax could sign with the Dodgers and stay with the Dodgers was Tommy Lasorda. And so every now and then Lasorda, in an interview, you catch him at the right moment, he'll say, yeah, I was the one who was responsible for Koufax in his great career. So he likes to joke about that.
How old is Lasorda now?
He's in his early 90s.
Oh my God.
So he now is the oldest Hall of Famer. I'll show you if I can get on the screen here. I don't know how well they'll show up, but one of the things that I like to collect is game-used bats. So this bat, and I'm going to see if I can get it close to the screen, and the writing on it. This is actually an Al Rosen bat, and he played with this one. This is from his rookie year, 1950, and this one, beautiful bat, really nice item. And another one I have, and I'm showing you this one for a reason, is another player, Mike Epstein. And Epstein played in the 60s for the Senators and then a few other teams after that. I think he might have been the distinction of one of the very few Jewish players, or if not the only Jewish player, for a period of time. Now, the interesting thing is if you look at these two bats together, they actually use the exact same bat. When you order bats from Louisville Slugger, you order based on a certain model that a player originated with. And so Epstein and Rosen actually used exactly the same bat. And there are certain traces of that through Jewish history. I would love to ask Epstein if he knew that when he got it, because sometimes they do get a bat that is somewhat similar to another player. This player was also mentioned. It's hard to see because it's such a dark bat, but this player, his name is Sammy Bone. He was mentioned very briefly in the movie. He played in the 1920s, mostly with Cincinnati. His original name was Cohen, so he was mentioned at that time where they said 3 or 4 players had changed their name from Cohen to something else. He changed it because in Cincinnati, he was told there was a very high German population and that it would not be very popular to have the name Cohen there. So that's it's a beautiful item. It's got actually some special labeling on it. This one here says bone, and they used to rub, well, some players still do, they used to rub bats with an animal bone to make them a little bit heavier and give them more weight. So this, even though players still do that today, they find ways to make their bats heavier. This little insignia here was only used in the 1920s. So that's another really interesting item.
Before you go further, I mean, I'm blown away with whatever you're talking about, first of all. Mike, what are your thoughts? But more than being blown away, like, what's the backstory? What's the access point for you to be like, I want that Where the hell do you get a 1920 piece? Like, how did you find that piece?
So there are a few people in the U.S. who are considered to be the top dealers, where if you buy from them, they're legitimate. And I usually go by somebody who either knows them or actually, from them themselves. And when bats are being authenticated, they work for the company. They are basically the authenticators in person.
Like a Beckett, so to speak, like one of those?
Beckett is not so much. They're mostly PSA. They're the authenticators. And so the guys who work for PSA Card, I've spoken to a lot of them and know them just through the industry. And so they are, they're people I will trust. And they're also people that I can trust if I give them a call and say, I see this bat out there. They can help authenticate it. And Louisville Slugger has its own website, as does Adirondack, for their bats. I have about 15 to 20 game-used bats from Jewish players.
How do you create a value? How do you create a like I don't know, maybe I'm naive to knowing, but because I was involved with the Jack of All Trades documentary, the baseball card one. Did you see it?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So that was
I remember the store very well. So
yeah,
I remember the story.
But how is there a value for the baseball bat? Like, how much is there an actual market value for an Al Rosen bat?
So on PSA Card, they do put an estimate, but it is very hard to tell because every bat can be a little different, cracked or uncracked, whether it was used at a certain time in his career. So that bat I ended up getting it for what pretty close to what the values said. In the industry, there is a markup. Jewish baseball is a niche market. So things will be a little bit more expensive if you are buying Jewish players, sometimes a lot more expensive. But that is a niche market, and they're very open about that. That's not a secret. There are people who will buy those, and those items don't come up very often. The Sammy Bone one I actually got through an auction house in the U.S. So that was just luck that I had my name on there should any of his items come up, that I would be contacted for it. A couple of other interesting stories with Koufax, by the way. So here's a question that everyone, of course, is aware of the pitching. Does anybody know which block of Yom Kippur did he not pitch on? Was it Kol Nidre? Was it Yom Kippur? Or was it, let's call it, breaking the fast?
I wasn't there.
I assumed that it was a day game. I assumed that it was a day game, so it would have been on Yom Kippur. But
I believe it was actually breaking the fast, because by that point they were playing the night games. And the interesting thing was he had pitched on breaking the fast before. He actually pitched. He had a game in 1961 where now was not the World Series. That was the difference. It was an earlier Yom Kippur that year. But he pitched. The game started 15 minutes after sundown for that game in 1961. So it was believed that he actually must have come to the park and been there before sundown on Yom Kippur back in 61. He ended up pitching, by the way, a 13-inning game. He pitched a complete game, threw over 200 pitches, and won it in the 13th inning. So it was very interesting. And he did the same in, I believe it was 1960. He pitched with the breaking the fast. So, there is a little bit of interesting history to there. But he only had, and they talk about it in the movie a little bit, he only had about 6 good years in his career. After that incident where Norm Sherry helped him kind of correct, he really only had, at that point, in his first 5-6 years of his career, he was an under 500 pitcher. So it was only the second half of his career. If you look at the span of a whole career, he didn't have the most wins for a Jewish pitcher. That was Ken Holtz the most wins. So, just a little bit more information about Sandy Koufax.
Yeah, it's interesting, Bob, in that the thing about Koufax, you're right. He couldn't throw strikes before that Norm Sherry conversation that we saw in the documentary. But then the next 6 years before his elbow blew out, and it's amazing that he had the year that he had in his final season. Had we known about elbow ligament replacement, had there been Tommy John surgery back in 1965, then Sandy probably would have had another 6 or 7 good years. But he was the 6-year peak that he had might have been the best peak that anyone has ever had. And the beautiful thing about modern days and this wonderful technology that we have is that you can look stuff up. And while you were talking about that, I looked it up, and Game 1 of the 1965 World Series was in fact a day game, and it was Yom Kippur. So
okay, so I stand corrected on that one. What time did that game start?
I don't know, but it was 2.5 hours long.
Okay. But yeah, he had pitched, if you go back to 1961, you'll see that he did actually start pitching right after Yom Kippur.
Yeah, we got to check that. We got to check that one out. We got to
check that one out.
Verification.
15 minutes after.
So first of all, thank you so much, Bob. You were awesome for those thoughts. I think we're running out of time. I mean, do we have any last questions before we wrap?
We're taking questions in this group chat window, and I don't know if everyone is aware, but if you sort of hover over the bottom of your screen, there is a button that says chat, and if you click on that, opens up a chat window, and you can ask us questions. And Paige loves this stuff. He'll stay all night. We'll for sure stay a little bit longer if anybody has questions for either one of us. But just put them in the chat window, and we'll be able to see them, and Paige will be able to. Is that
okay? Are we okay for a few questions? Do you want to?
Sure, if someone has a question or
give it up for Gail, everybody. The mastermind of all. Okay, well, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead. I've been this time has flew by. I've been having such a good time with my buddy Mr. Mike Wilner, who's been gracing us with his presence. I'm really grateful. And I guess if we don't have any questions, we're gonna wrap it up with our very good friend, Mr. Howard Price, who will say a few words and off we go. But from the bottom of my heart, this was actually emotional for me because my father-in-law passed away last year, and he loved baseball. He lived for baseball, and I just know he would have been one of the people that were watching, and just would have been given some points about all things baseball and Jewish. So we have one question from Josh Price. Let's see. Could there be a Major League Baseball player who doesn't play on Shabbat? Do you want to answer that?
I think it would be really difficult, but there was one, but he wasn't Jewish. In the 1980s, the Texas Rangers had a pitcher named Edwin Correa, and he was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he refused to pitch on Saturdays, and they worked their schedule around him so that when his day came up, somebody else pitched. Now he wasn't good enough, long enough to be able to make those kind of demands and still have a career. But yeah, Edwin Correa, a non-Jew, didn't pitch on Shabbos. He probably pitched Friday nights. I'm not quite sure, to be honest, what the Seventh-day Adventist rules are, but I know that he didn't pitch on Saturdays. But I think, if you want to get into this business, that's generally a sacrifice you're going to have to make. If I had my druthers, I'd prefer not to work on Shabbos. I would love to be with my family on, for Friday night dinner. That we have the tradition that we've had for my whole life and long before, that I get to go in the winter, but not in the summer. But part of going into this industry, whether it's as a broadcaster or a player or whatever, is you know, there are no Friday nights off, there are no Saturdays off, period. You gotta know that that's part of the gig. So I wonder what would happen if there was somebody who said, I want to play in the major leagues, I want to play professional baseball, but I'm not going to play 2 games a week because Friday night, Saturday, you're not starting many games. Even a Saturday night game, it's Shabbos for the first 2 hours in the summer. So it would be very difficult to be able to do that.
Well, thanks for that. So let's end on a high. First of all, thank you so much, and let's get Howard. Howard, let's give you some closing thoughts on this. And again, thank you so much for having us. We've been honored to be a part of this awesome event, and thank you for sharing all of your precious times from pandemic land over there. Every one of you that are watching, thank you for sharing it with us. We hope we educated you, entertained you a little bit, and got you through the day with a smile. So, Howard, take it away, my man.
Okay, I'm Howard Price. I'd like to wrap up. I want to thank Paige and Mike for an excellent conversation. I want to thank the McNamara family. And I just want to remind everybody what a great Jewish baseball player we had in Toronto for 7 or 8 years. He hit only three less home runs in his career than Hank Greenberg, and that was Sean Green. Now, and Sean Green had his terrific year in 1999. I was involved with Federation. We saw this as a marketing dream. And he did some stuff for Federation. Unfortunately, he got traded away the next year. And in a bittersweet moment, he came back next year as a visiting Dodger. And I got to present him a plaque on behalf of the Toronto Jewish community. Sorry, it's a lousy picture. But we had one of the best ever in Toronto. So on that note, I'd like to thank everybody. We hope you're enjoying the series. We're trying to get your mind off the virus. We wish we would have had a couple more announcements to make for tonight, but keep tuned because we have some really good stuff coming up further as well. Good night to everybody.
Good night, everybody. On behalf of myself and Michael Wilner, thank you guys for the opportunity for sharing the time. Jews in baseball, very powerful combo. Send love to all those that are affected, and be safe, and we'll see you guys soon. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Paige. You guys were awesome.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Paige.
No
Great
problem.
program. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.
You guys too.
Bye. Bye.
Hi, Grandpa.
Hi, Ricky.
Hi, Gail.
Bye. Hi, Arlene.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Tomorrow's the hairdresser.